Now,
So
what hormones are impacted during this time?
yeah. So the main hormones that we're talking about are the ones produced by the ovaries. So there's three players. We have estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And each of those hormones is declining through that perimenopause transition. And some of them continue to drop even after the last menstrual period.
Wow.
The first one to go is progesterone. Progesterone is, I think, in order to understand progesterone, we should talk a little bit about what happens in the normal reproductive cycle.
Yes.
When a woman is after puberty, when she's having regular menstrual periods, she will have a very predictable rise and fall of hormones throughout the month. As the egg in the ovary is being signaled to mature, estrogen levels are rising. That would be from the time of your period until about mid-cycle. At mid-cycle, ovulation should occur. And after ovulation, the small sac that the egg was growing in will turn into a little mini gland that lives for about 2 weeks, and it produces progesterone. So in the first half of the cycle, from day 1 to approximately day 14, estrogen is the dominant hormone. And in the second half of the cycle, from ovulation until the next period, progesterone is the dominant hormone. And it's the interplay between these two hormones that allows us to have that regular rhythm of the menstrual cycle. Around age 30, the production of that little mini sac that makes the progesterone becomes less likely to happen. It might not happen at all, or the little sac, which we call the corpus luteum, it doesn't last the full 2 weeks. So progesterone levels start to drop roughly in our 30s. Estrogen production continues just as normal. So the interplay between those two hormones is no longer balanced. Estrogen becomes more dominant throughout the entire month because there's inadequate amounts of progesterone. And it's during that stage that women will start to notice some changes are happening. She might notice that her periods are becoming heavier. She might have cramps. She will be noticing more premenstrual symptoms, especially bloating and breast pain and cravings, sometimes headaches. Often she will feel that she's putting on water weight or even gaining weight from fat deposition. Mood changes start to show up, and commonly fatigue. So this is the early stages. I call that early perimenopause, when progesterone levels are a little too low and estrogen is doing its own thing, still normal, still cycling, but not being properly balanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, that does. And I'm actually learning something because it sounds like progesterone is the one that actually kind of starts a lot of the challenges, right? I guess I always thought menopause was, well, I mean, I knew it was the three hormones, but I honestly didn't know how progesterone was really playing in there. I thought it was more estrogen than any other hormone.
Yes, and estrogen comes up a little bit later as we get into 40s and closer to 50, because now the eggs are having a lot more difficulty responding to the signals from the brain, and ovulation may not happen at all, or sometimes it happens twice in a month. So things get really mixed up and confused. But over those last 5 years before the period stop, that's when we start to see the estrogen levels declining. So this is later perimenopause. And I think of it like a woman has a gas tank that's filled with estrogen, and you can go from having a full tank of estrogen to having absolutely no estrogen in a matter of a day or two. So this goes on throughout the month. You lose that regular, nice, gentle rhythm of the estrogen that was once present. It becomes very erratic. So the estrogen levels are spiking and falling literally overnight. And this causes a lot of confusion in the body. And I just always talk about it as being hormonal chaos.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I think a lot of women, including myself, before I started to be your patient, was the fact that testosterone plays such a major role in women's health.
There's, I didn't know that, Carolyn, until we had that conversation some weeks ago, how much it played. Because when you think of testosterone, you just think of male dominant. That's the male
absolutely.
Dominant. You didn't think.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't attach it to it being a hormone that women produce as well, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about testosterone, but I'll just finish up the estrogen story and then we'll move on to that one.
Sure,
So
yeah.
the estrogen level is dropping. Many of the premenstrual symptoms get exaggerated, and then we start to see some new symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats, vaginal dryness, urinary incontinence, skin changes, especially fine lines and decreased elasticity of the skin, start to see those wrinkles, brain fog and poor concentration. We know estrogen is extremely important for the brain, fatigue, and just a pretty much global over like poor tolerance to stress, I find.
Yeah.
And I think it's a combination of the not sleeping and just not feeling like yourself, because estrogen's been such an important part of a woman's life for 30 years and suddenly it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happens in your late 40s, early 50s. Eventually you reach, as I said earlier, you reach that final egg. The last one drops. There won't be any more. Now estrogen is low, your gas tank is empty, and it stays empty for the rest of your life unless you go on hormone replacement. And that lack of estrogen has some pretty detrimental effects on the female body. She may continue to have symptoms for a few years after that final period, hot flashes and insomnia, and maybe a little bit of brain fog. Some women recover from that, and it's almost like they get used to their new normal. But for the majority of women, they have other problems that they just put up with if they don't seek help. Vaginal dryness can lead to a point where they're not able to have comfortable sex, or they might have pain and bleeding, recurrent urinary tract infections. Memory can become very severely impaired, have joint pain. Sometimes autoimmune conditions show up at this stage. There's a lot that can go wrong when the hormones disappear.
Now,